Oh, YouTube. Well, today I'm visiting a couple of interesting places in my home area. First, I'm going to stop at Mount Albion Cemetery, go through the gates here. I didn't think the bus would fit, so I parked out front. Anyway, this was first done in the 1840s, and at that time there was a big movement to make cemeteries more park-like. So they acquired 17 acres and on this hillside and tiered it, so the grave sites are actually on level ground, but it's rolling hills. And they did things like, oh, here's a fountain, and down over the hill there's actually a fish pond that is fed by a natural spring. Now, being in a cemetery, I'm not sure I would partake of the water in that spring, but it's a neat feature. And they also have this chapel. And I don't believe we can go in, but just to get an idea, it's a nice little chapel built into the hillside, and would not surprise me if there's a crypt back in behind there. Back in the day, hard winters, hard digging graves, and they you save the bodies till spring back in the hillside back underneath here. So anyway, there are a few notables buried here, but nobody you've ever heard of. Few senators from and representatives from New York State and other states around, but we're headed up there, up the top of the hill. So let me get up there and we'll see what we can find. There's a view from part way up the hill, and as I said, you can see how it's terraced, so the grave sites are flat. And on up there are some pretty impressive monuments. And actually this road, a lot of the roads in here are paved, but there's a lot that are still as it was back then. Little dirt trails, maybe some rocks here and there, some cement, but you know, it's, and if you're ever in the Albion, New York area in October in years past, and that probably, I'm not sure about this year, but they still do it, is they have a ghost tour where you can go around, and there's people portraying some of the more notable people buried here, telling their story. So it's fun if you're into that kind of stuff. And this is what I came to show you. This is the Soldiers and Sailors Tower Monument here in Mount Albion Cemetery. Now, after the Civil War, Communities all over the nation look for ways to commemorate the dead from that community. A lot of ones put up statues of famous generals and officers, generic ones that in south of here in Batavia, there's a big spire with a soldier on the top and 4 cannons at the bottom. Here, the residents decided that they should honor all of the Civil War dead. So 464, I believe. So let me take a step inside and I'll show you that. All right, let's take a look inside here. And on these marble plaques are a listing of the 464 dead from the Civil War from Orleans County. And we are going to go up these stairs. And I'm going to save you the tedious part of this walk because it's just me going upstairs. Now, partway up, and not that far, just above the doorway, it narrows down and gets pretty dark, which makes coming down so much more interesting. And the railing runs out because it's rubbing up against the wall, and the only light is from these little openings. So this is how it is most of the way up. No railing, just these cast iron steps hung off the central thing. So I'm all the way up the top, and wasps over there, so I'm guessing there's a wasp nest on that side, and they aren't happy to have me up here. But I'll leave them alone. Hopefully they'll leave me alone. But this is the view from up here, and this is the highest point in Orleans County. This is the Lake Plains way out there, and the haze is Lake Ontario, and that haze is, like I said, we're in upstate New York between Rochester and Buffalo, and that haze is the smoke from out west. Has traveled this far. So the wasps are getting a little bit anxious. So let me go back down and I'll tell you a little bit more about this when I'm not worried about getting stung. Okay, a little bit of information about this tower. It's made out of Medina sandstone, and if you've ever visited New York or you've heard about the famous brownstones housing in New York, it's made out of the same stuff. This area has quarries all over. A lot of the quarrymen came from overseas, immigrants, to work on the quarries here, and if you go 20 feet down pretty much anywhere in Orleans County, you're going to hit Medina sandstone. Famous, the name comes from the next town over, which is Medina, New York. This is in Albion, and this tower is 82 feet high. After the Civil War, the residents were all fighting to have some sort of memorial, and they decided to have a memorial to all of the men from Orleans County who died during the conflict, all 464, I think. And so they started building this in 1873, ran out of money a couple times, more fundraisers, still, even back then. And they dedicated this on July 4th, 1876. So 100th anniversary of the country, and they dedicated this monument. Over the years after that, they did disinter the various soldiers who were buried here and move them down the hill. There is a section of this cemetery set aside for veterans. And and it's in pretty much every conflict from the Civil War on. The cemetery originally was only 17 acres, and in the intervening years they've actually bought more land, and it's now 75 acres, but the back section isn't used at this point for graves. It's still open. When they did start the cemetery, in order to finance it, they auctioned off plots. And so the well-to-do in the area bought this and that. So, you know, a lot of them built monuments and like stone or concrete, probably stone in this case, fenced it in kind of things for their family plot. And then subsequent family members buried in it. Some of the areas are single graves. My father-in-law, who I never met, is buried down the bottom of the hill, and my mother-in-law's ashes are buried in the same plot on top of him. So, and I think her brother is also, his ashes are there. So, so my wife was from this town, and now, an interesting thing that I didn't realize until I was doing some reading up on this is that by the 1970s, early 70s, this was in pretty bad shape, and the town was considering tearing it down. The local high school kids, now my wife graduated in '69. She never mentioned this. Well, we didn't meet till '74 or '73. But the high school kids, when they heard that they were going to tear us down, they started doing some fundraisers and raised $30,000 to fix this back up. And obviously they did. And it was rededicated on July 4th, 1976. So 100 years between, well, when it was first dedicated and the second dedication seemed appropriate. My wife and I were married 74, and how we didn't know that this was happening, or maybe she did, but I wasn't paying attention, or she didn't mention it. But she brought me here shortly after that, and I've been back a few times. Probably the coolest time was on my way home from work, and very, very thick fog, and me and my brother-in-law stopped up here, climbed the tower, and we were above the fog. So looking out, we saw a couple of church steeples. The one tree over here, the one on the other side of the tower, is actually too tall now to see the town. But at that point we could see the church steeples. And about 15 miles or so to the east of Albion, the town of Brockport in Monroe County decided that they would like to have a memorial tower too, and this was built and dedicated about 13 years after the one in Mount Albion Cemetery. It's also made of Medina sandstone, and unlike the one in Albion, this one does not have the plaques or the flared out base. And it is right next to a cemetery. There's a cemetery down in there. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't graves that have been swallowed up by these woods. When I lived in this town from 75 to 78, and this tower did not have the fence. It was a ruin. You could see it from the road, which you can't now. You have to park in, there's a one engine fire station down here, and right next to where the railroad tracks used to be. And you can park there and walk in. They do keep it mowed. This was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1994. They call this one the Soldiers Memorial Tower, where the one in Albion was the Sailor and Soldiers Memorial. Anyway, I'm gonna fly the drone up and see if I can get a shot down inside of this one, and to get an idea. Last time I was here 40 years ago, there was still the pipe for the staircase, and I don't remember the top being in that good a shape. So obviously they've done some repairs to it and fixed it up around here, but it's sort of a little hidden historic thing here in Brockport. So let me get the drone up in the air, see what I can see. Well, that ends my tale of two towers, and I'm going to get back on the road, see what I can find, and I'll see you later, YouTube.
He jumped off the wagon and he spread out his hands. Brace yourselves and calm for your women. We will do